On your left.
Hey, Mary, my brothers. I wanted to read this. This is something that we talked about yesterday on Art New Styles panel. Black men unemployment still high despite 4.5 million open jobs. Companies still aren't hiring black men despite 4.5 million open jobs in the U.S. It's costing the U.S. economy $50 billion. Despite a nationwide cry for workers, businesses aren't hiring black men, and it's costing the country billions of dollars, according to a new study by the Center for Economic Policy Research, CEPR. The unemployment rate for black men remains high at 7.3% in November, compared to 3.4% among white men looking for work, according to Labor Department data. Roughly 697,000 black men need employment, even as the country recorded 10.6 million vacant jobs in November. According to CEPR, black men are excluded from the workforce due to racist hiring practices. See, racism still does exist, boys and girls, as well as being killed and imprisoned at a higher rate than other groups. This doesn't just hurt black men and their families and communities. CEPR estimates that the cost income from racial discrimination costs the overall U.S. economy $50 billion a year. By focusing on closing the black-white jobs gap, we could add about $30 billion annually to black communities and make a significant reduction in black poverty, writes Algernon Austin, the author of the CEPR study. The figure jumps to $50 billion when factoring in black men of prime working age who die or are incarcerated. For that reason, as Austin told Insider, the unemployment rate is only part of the picture, since it only captures people who are currently looking for work. The joblessness rate, or those who aren't looking at all, is typically 3 times larger, he says. Since we typically focus on the unemployment rate, we are missing the full impact of joblessness for black men. For black men, there's never been a period of low unemployment. That's true. The unemployment rate for black men has never been low, Austin says. It would be more correct to characterize it as high, very high, or extremely high. While employers are calling the current labor conditions in the U.S. a shortage, as they struggle to hire, black men of working age continue to have the highest unemployment rate of any gender or race. Wow. Any gender or race. That's including black women. It's been that way for the past 2 decades. Okay. Throughout job markets, ups and downs, experiments on hiring discrimination stretching back to the 1970s show it happens from entry-level positions to jobs requiring college degrees. Yes, Michael Gaddis, a UCLA sociologist who studies unemployment discrimination, told Insider. Black job seekers face discrimination even when they have an elite college degree, such as one from Harvard or Stanford. I'd like to see that one. CEPR study found that although there are other groups that typically face high unemployment and labor market discrimination, such as black women and other genders of color, those groups tend to rebound depending on the job's climate, while black men do not. Austin found that when the labor market is tight, for instance, black women's unemployment to population ratio becomes very similar to that of white women. Strange how that happens. Criminal justice and black employment are inextricably linked. One major reason for black men not working is that many of them are incarcerated or die at a young age. Well, if they're incarcerated or dead, it'd be kind of hard for them to work. I'm sure they shouldn't be counted. Even before the pandemic, black people saw roughly 74,000 more deaths than their white counterparts between 2016 and 2018. According to a report from last February, for reasons like greater infant mortality, environmental damage to black communities, and lower quality health care, an examination of the 30 largest U.S. cities, despite the fact they make up less of the country's population. A Brookings study from last March found that incarcerated black men account for a third of all black men excluded from the labor force. Okay. Looking at a statistic like the imprisonment for drug use reveals a disparity. Black and white people use drugs at a similar rate, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, that the former are criminalized for it at higher rates. Black people, who only represent 13% of the U.S. population, account for nearly 40% of those incarcerated for drug law violations. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Black Americans are also getting sick and dying at higher rates due to the pandemic's exacerbation of existing health inequalities. But despite the prevalence of vaccines and apparent market recovery, recent reports show that Black Americans continue to see higher rates of joblessness. CPR's report shows there is a wide pool of Black Americans to hire. It's a self-evident discrimination in the labor market revealing itself, Dr. William Spriggs, an economics professor at Howard University and the chief economist for the AFL-CIO, told Insider in September. He added the numbers this time are just startling. I don't really have to add too much to this. Basically, they said everything that I would have said anyway. They make all these excuses for not hiring black men. And basically, this has been a serious problem. I thought we had at least a small amount of this problem solved after 2000, but evidently not. Evidently not. They're turning black men into haves and have-nots. And I was saying in other places, your black women don't care as long as they got their welfare and their income. They don't care. Half the time they don't want you anyway. But also I was saying yesterday on Arts panel, I had I'm not gonna call them Boscos, but there's a couple of Boscos on there and saying that there's no racism. Racism doesn't exist. There's no such thing as color. There's no discrimination, systemic discriminations to black men. And guess what? Very next day, here we are. Okay. Got an article from a good white source saying exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Do you hear our sisters crying out about it? No, you never will. You're on your own, black man. You're on your own. And this economy, as far as workers, you're going to get a little bit of recovery toward the middle of the year, right before the midterm elections. Right after that, man, you're going to see a whole lot of people get replaced by automation. It's going to be shocking, in my opinion. Some of this stuff already is shocking. They're starting to replace people. But the thing is, they haven't gone through the transition. COVID's kind of slowed things down, and it sped some things up, but it's also slowed some things down. A lot of your social change has not sped up. Your economy has, your technology has, but your environment probably has, but how you feel and what you think about has not really changed. So we're still looking like in the 90s as far as our worldview, instead of like the 2020s. It is what it is. But anyway, with that, I'm going to jump off here. This is Beat Us Out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.